When I was a child, my family never stayed in one place for very long, constantly moving like a drop of water in a vast river. However, when I turned 8, we settled in Rhode Island, and it became our home until I left for college in Colorado Springs. Although most of my memories are tied to Rhode Island, there are fragments of memories from the various homes we had before settling down. While many of these memories are hazy and insignificant, such as playing with a boy in the backyard of a North Carolina house or attempting to build a raft to float down a creek behind a Pennsylvania apartment, there is one set of memories that remain vivid in my mind. It's as if they occurred just yesterday, and while I often question if they are simply lucid dreams resulting from a long illness I experienced that spring, deep down I know they are genuine. Our home was situated just outside the lively metropolis of New Vineyard, Maine, which boasted a population of 643. Despite being a family of 3, we resided in a spacious house that had more rooms than we could use during our 5-month stay. Although it seemed like a waste of space, it was the only available property within an hour's drive of my father's workplace. The day after my 5th birthday, which only my parents attended, I developed a fever. The doctor diagnosed me with mononucleosis, a condition that forbade me from engaging in rough play and promised more fever for at least 3 weeks. Unfortunately, this illness couldn't have come at a worse time, as we were in the process of moving to Pennsylvania. Most of my belongings had already been packed away, rendering my room empty and lifeless. To keep me occupied, my mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, which became my primary source of entertainment for the following weeks. However, the lurking presence of boredom always threatened to compound my misery. My memory of how I encountered Mr. Widemouth is somewhat hazy, but I believe it was approximately a week after being diagnosed with mono. My first recollection of the diminutive creature was inquiring about his name. He replied that I should refer to him as Mr. Widemouth due to the size of his mouth. Interestingly, everything about him appeared to be oversized in proportion to his body, including his head, eyes, and misshapen ears. Nevertheless, his mouth was unquestionably the most prominent feature. As Mr. Widemouth flipped through one of my books, I couldn't help but notice his resemblance to a Furby. "You look a bit like a Furby," I remarked. He paused and gave me a perplexed expression. "Furby? What's a Furby?" he inquired. I shrugged my shoulders. "You know, the toy with the big ears. It's a robotic pet that you can pet and feed, almost like a real animal." Mr. Widemouth resumed his activity. "You don't need one of those. They're not the same as having a genuine friend," he stated. I recall Mr. Widemouth vanishing every time my mother dropped in to check on me. "I hide under your bed," he later explained. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they'll forbid us from playing together." Initially, we didn't engage in much activity. Mr. Widemouth merely perused my books, engrossed in the stories and illustrations they contained. However, on the 3rd or 4th morning of our acquaintance, he greeted me with a broad grin. "I have a new game for us to play," he announced. "But we have to wait until after your mother checks on you because she can't witness us playing. It's a secret game." Following my mother's customary delivery of more books and soda, Mr. Widemouth crept out from beneath the bed and grasped my hand. "We must go to the end of this corridor," he urged. At first, I protested, as my parents had instructed me not to leave my bed without their authorization. However, Mr. Widemouth persisted until I relented. The room we entered lacked furnishings or wallpaper. The only distinguishing feature was a window opposite the entrance. Mr. Widemouth scurried across the chamber and shoved the window open with force. He then gestured for me to gaze outside at the ground below. We occupied the 2nd floor of the house, situated atop a hill, so due to the slope, the drop outside the window was greater than 2 stories. "I enjoyed pretending up here," Mr. Widemouth stated. "I pretend that there's a massive, soft trampoline down there, and I leap. If you pretend hard enough, You'll bounce back up like a feather. Give it a try. As a feverish 5-year-old, I harbored just a modicum of doubt as I peered down and pondered the possibility. It's a long way down, I hesitated. But that's part of the thrill. It wouldn't be exciting if it was only a short fall. If that were the case, you might as well just jump on a real trampoline. I considered Mr. Weidmuth's offer as he held out the small box towards me. I was curious about juggling and intrigued by the idea of learning a new skill. Sure, that sounds like fun, I said with a smile. Mr. Weidmuth's eyes lit up and he handed me the box. Inside were 3 small plush balls. I spent the next hour clumsily trying to toss them in the air, but they kept falling to the ground. Mr. Weidmuth was patient with me, offering tips and encouragement. As the day went on, I found myself enjoying the challenge. By the time my mother arrived with my lunch, I had managed to juggle the balls a few times in a row without dropping them. I was proud of myself and eager to show Mr. Weidmuth. He grinned when I told him about my progress. "See, I told you it was fun," he said. "But you know what would be even more fun? If we tried juggling from the window. It's a lot higher up than the floor, so it will be even more impressive." I hesitated. I had already turned down his last suggestion, and I didn't want to disappoint him again. But the thought of juggling from such a height made me uneasy. "I don't know about that, Mr. Weidmuth," I said. He pouted. "Fine, I guess we can just keep practicing down here," he said, but I could tell he was disappointed. I peered into the box and saw that it was filled with knives. My heart raced with fear, and I immediately protested, realizing the danger that Mr. Weidmuth had brought into my room. My parents had always warned me to stay away from sharp objects. "I can't do that," I exclaimed. "My parents will be furious if they see me playing with knives. I'll be punished for a year." Mr. Weidmuth's face twisted in anger at my refusal. "Juggling knives is fun," he insisted. "Just try it." I shook my head and pushed the box away. "No, it's too dangerous. I can't throw knives in the air like that." Mr. Weidmuth's expression darkened into a scowl as he snatched the box of knives and slinked under my bed, where he remained for the rest of the day. I couldn't help but wonder how often he was hiding beneath me. After that incident, sleeping became a challenge for me. Mr. Weidmuth frequently woke me up at night, insisting that he had placed a real trampoline below the window, a massive one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined his offer and tried to go back to sleep, but he persisted. At times, he remained by my side until early morning, coaxing me to jump. Playing with him wasn't enjoyable anymore. One morning, my mother gave me permission to wander outside. She believed that the fresh air would benefit me, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Excited, I put on my sneakers and ran to the back porch, craving the sensation of sunshine on my skin. Mr. Weidmuth was waiting for me outside. "I have something to show you," he said. I must have looked hesitant, because he quickly added, "It's completely safe, I promise." He led me to the entrance of a deer trail that wound its way through the woods behind the house. "This is a special path," he said. "I've taken many friends your age down here before to a magical place. You're not ready to go there yet, but one day I hope to take you." As I walked back to the house, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of place Mr. Weidmuth was talking about. I met Mr. Weidmuth 2 weeks prior to our move to Pennsylvania, and by then, all of our belongings had been loaded onto a moving truck. I would be accompanying my father on the drive, but I didn't tell Mr. Weidmuth about my departure. At 5 years old, I had a feeling that his intentions may not have been entirely innocent, despite his promises, so I kept it to myself and said goodbye to him in silence. The next morning, my father and I set off at 4 a.m. with a goal of reaching Pennsylvania by the next day. My father was fueled by coffee and energy drinks, and he seemed more like an athlete preparing for a marathon than a man embarking on a long drive. "Are you ready to go?" my father asked, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded and leaned against the car window, hoping to catch some sleep before the sun rose. My father tried to reassure me, promising that this would be our last move and that things would get better once he was promoted. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. As we backed out of the driveway, I saw Mr. Widemouth's silhouette in my bedroom window. He remained motionless until the truck was about to turn onto the main road, where he gave me a small, pitiful wave goodbye while holding a steak knife. I didn't wave back. Years later, I revisited New Vineyard, and the only thing that remained of our old house was the foundation, as it had been destroyed in a fire several years after we left. Out of curiosity, I decided to follow the deer trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me as a child. Despite half expecting him to jump out from behind a tree and scare me, I felt like he was gone, somehow bound to the house that no longer stood. The trail led me to the New Vineyard Memorial Cemetery, where I noticed that many of the tombstones belonged to children.